Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Unfiltered. Of course, brought to you by Fighters First, the Fighters First Network, and FightersFirst.shop. Get all your latest clothing and apparel at FightersFirst.shop. I'm your host, Mike Ginn, joined today, a man that in the MMA community, combat sports community, doesn't need much introduction. Of course, he's also ventured out into Hollywood and made quite a good living for himself out there as well, but always involved in combat sports. Of course, I'm talking about Cung Le. Cung, how you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time. I know you stay busy. I know you're always doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that. But I want to kind of take people on a journey, get people to know you a little bit better for those that might not know. Obviously, combat sports legend, you've been doing this pretty much your whole life. Now you're upwards around my age, so we're getting a little bit up there. So there's a lot of story to tell. But let's go ahead and go back to the beginning a little bit. We'll, of course, touch on some things that people want to know. Obviously, the UFC lawsuit's always in the news. As I labeled it a few episodes ago on Art of MMA back in December, UFC's $5 billion problem. So that's definitely something to touch about. Of course, you've done a bunch of movies, Savage Dog, of course, Tekken. You're involved in a bunch of projects now. And of course, everybody knows you from your time in StrikeForce and UFC as well. So we're going to touch on all that. But let's go back to the beginning a little bit. You're originally from Vietnam. I've heard a little bit about your story. I've seen you in other interviews kind of talk about it a little bit. But you left at a very young age. Your dad was locked up after you guys left. You spent some time in camps, refugee camps in the Philippines and Guam before you ended up in California. I know you were really young at that time, but how much of that do you actually remember?
Yeah, a good thing is I don't really remember much now. Just the stories that my grandfather or my mom would tell me. The first refugee camp when we left Vietnam was a week before the Fall of Saigon. And we left, and then because he was a former chief of police, which is like a colonel's rank for 5 different cities, basically the U.S. government said you have 2 hours to get 1 suitcase each and get airlifted out to the Philippines, which is the first refugee camp, and or stay and deal with what would happen. So my grandfather got my mom and his side of the family out, and my dad, he wasn't ready to leave, with all the things that was going on. So we left. I don't want to. That's a long story, but we basically went from the Philippines, stayed in there for about 3 months, and then went to Guam, stayed over there 5-6 weeks, and then another refugee camp, I guess, down by Monterey, and then we got a family to sponsor us, and got into a house about a year later, and since then, as soon as I started learning English and started speaking, the bullying started happening, and my mom put me in martial arts, and I guess the rest is history.
Taekwondo, right?
Yep, Taekwondo, then Vietnamese traditional Kung Fu, but was really never consistent until I started doing wrestling because my mom was working 2, sometimes 3 jobs.
I think that's what will come to a shock to people. Like your first real, like competing and everything was wrestling. Like you did wrestling for a long time, and you're of course known for your striking and your spinning back kicks and all your different skills striking. But you have a very solid wrestling base that you went all the way through into college with, right?
Yes, I did 2 years of junior college, but I wrestled year round since I was in 7th grade, and I wrestled. My first year, I actually even made it to the nationals and got in the top 8, and then I loved it, wrestling, and I wrestled all the way till my 2nd year in college.
So when you were wrestling, I think there was a story I heard one time, like you wanted to try to play football too, but then your coach wouldn't let you or something like that?
Actually, I had went out because wrestling season hasn't started yet, and a couple of my buddies were playing football, and I was like a really skinny Asian kid, but I was really fast. So I was, going out for the football team, and then I remember right after football practice, I would go and do like freestyle wrestling practice. And then my coach, Oscar Gonzalez, at the time, I was a freshman. He drove up and he saw me out in the field because I was running up towards his car to, tell him what's up. And he's all, "What are you doing out there?" And I was I just, I'm about to play football. I made the team.
He's be with my friends, right?
Yeah. He's all, "Do you want to be good or great?" And I was like, "Of course we want to be great." He's all, "You can only be great at one sport. Is it going to be wrestling or football?" I said, "Wrestling." He's all, "Well, get in the car. First, got to get to practice. And if I were you, football, there's a lot of injuries. And,
yeah, because there's no injuries whatsoever in wrestling, right?
I know, right? And then, of course, he knew that I came with the 2-year wrestling in 7th and 8th grade. And, so, it was, he wanted me to stick to one sport, and he talked me into it. So that was my last day of football practice. I told the coach, I'm just going to focus on wrestling. And, I ended up, making high school All-American, and went on to becoming junior college All-American, wrestled year round, went to nationals, won the AAU nationals in freestyle and Greco-Roman, and even tried out Sambo. At the time they had Sambo in there, and won that division too. So I remember my junior year, I won the AAU nationals in Sambo, Greco-Roman, and freestyle. I remember that because I remember my last match in freestyle, which was the last day, was in the finals, and it was I can't remember the kid's name, but it was some state champion from Montana. I was a junior, and I was down 4-0, and then I came back to beat him 6-4. So that was like the biggest highlight, because that was like my first comeback win, being down, by, almost being shut out, 4-0.
Do you remember your first like match you had, like back in 7th, 8th grade?
No, I just remember, just going to wrestling practice for the first day in jeans, and it was hot. I was like, I'm definitely gonna bring some shorts tomorrow, because I just stumbled onto the freestyle club at my junior high school, and I followed some buddies in and just watched, and then the coaches are, you want to jump in? I said, sure. I only have jeans on. He's like, I don't care, get in there, wrestle. I just got in there, and I didn't know any moves, but I think I muscled the kid, and I ended up in a head and arm, and I just held him down, and then and I guess that definitely got me coming back the next day.
Were you a fan as a kid of like professional wrestling or anything like that, or you just kind of like stumbled into wrestling because of the competitiveness of it?
No, I watch a little bit of WWE, but I wasn't a big fan. I've just here and there. I was just more following some buddies that was going to join wrestling, and then they told me to come check it out. I went to practice and just sitting there, and the coach told me to jump in, so I jumped in.
It's always 50-50 with kids why they jump into wrestling. It's either because they're fans of like the professional, or it's because of the competitive, like I want to try to fight, but this is more legalized type thing.
Yeah,
especially in that age group. I did it for a little bit too, and I was a little bit of both. I just had a competitive itch. I had to do everything. I did Taekwondo, I did Aikido, I did stuff like that. Later on, different stuff. But so you're doing all this. Did the Sambo kind of transition you into the Sanshou, like doing a little bit of that?
No, Sambo is just more like, I remember you wear either the blue or red shorts, and then you have a blue or red gi. If you're in the red corner or the blue corner.
Yeah.
And then, while you're in the tunnel, they call it, on deck. So you put on the gi and you get ready to go out there and you shake the guy's hands. And I just basically, I didn't know anything about Sambo. I just beat them by using wrestling,
Yeah.
The other kids that was using Sambo, I just did my double leg blast, picked them up, slammed them down, and continue to do that, and won the AAU nationals by wrestling.
So how do you go from this like world-class wrestler to switching over to like Sanshou and then eventually kickboxing, where you made your early career? How did that transition happen?
Well, I wouldn't say I was a world-class wrestler, but I was good.
I mean, you won enough honors, so.
Yeah. It's just I've done Taekwondo when I was younger, but never was consistent. Taekwondo and Vietnamese Kung Fu. But I think after my second year in college, I just got back into the martial arts and then started training. And because of the wrestling background, I was in better shape than any of the instructors. And I used to run, wear them down and just push the pace and break them during training. And I was able to use my wrestling, so I was taking them down. But then I noticed, I want my kicks to be like one of the instructors, and then I started watching more boxing, and I started watching more, kind of bare knuckle type of fighting, and then
like early days UFC, like tough man competitions.
Yeah, like those kind, and then I just started entering into like point fighting tournaments, then Taekwondo tournaments, then continuous sparring tournaments, then I got into full contact, and I just start raising money to get to tournaments and fight. Then I found Sanshou in Alabama, where the rules are punching, kicking, and throwing. And I called up the promoter, and the promoter's name was Sean Liu. He was like a lower Shaolin monk. And then I went out there and won the middleweight, and then there was a light heavyweight, and then they combined it those two weights for like a grand champion. And they asked me if I wanted to fight one more fight, and I was like, yeah, sure, throw me in there. And then in the final fight, when I realized, hey, I should just be fighting at my weight, because the guy was a little bit bigger, but I broke my hand and my foot on him, but I got a KO by doing a scissor kick, and my heel hit him in the stomach. And then afterwards, like when the adrenaline wore off, I was like, oh, my hand hurts, I can barely walk. So it was definitely tough getting back, getting on the plane and having luggages and stuff like that. So those were
nothing hurts until the adrenaline wears off, and then you feel everything.
Yeah.
So you didn't really have like a ton of like striking experience. Did like some of that just come natural to you as you kind of like grew into kickboxing?
Well, in Taekwondo,
I mean, you had the early on, but you didn't really do it that much as a kid, right?
No, not as a kid. I had basics, like I had a decent foundation. I just practiced it like a lot before I went to the tournament, and I did. I went around to different schools to get some different training partners, and I just went out there and didn't even have a corner. I just went out. I flew out by myself, and then I knew another fighter out there, and I cornered him, and he cornered me, and then and I guess from that point on, Sean Liu asked me if I wanted to go to the nationals, which was in 3 months, and I prepared for that. And after the nationals, he said, hey, there's a U.S. team trials. You should try that too. And I went out to do the team trials. The next thing I know, my first year in doing Sanshou, I was representing the USA at the World Championships against 63 countries,
How old were you then? About 18, 19?
No, I was about 20, 21 or 22, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at what point did you kind of transition from that into like full kickboxing? Because you had your first pro fight in August of '97.
From that tournament, from that
on,
tournament,
just like the next day, like go.
I'm done. I'm not gonna go back to school. I'm just gonna train and do some private training with some other students and made that my full-time job.
When you were doing, because you're 17-0 as a kickboxer, you had completely undefeated. Very few fights were even close. A lot of knockouts. As that time was going on in kickboxing, were you thinking about, because at that point MMA was starting to grow, obviously not where it was by the time you finished your kickboxing career, but it was kind of starting, especially 2001, 2002, started getting more on the map. By mid 2000s, obviously, when you finally jumped into it. But was kickboxing, like, were you happy kickboxing, or was your goal always to do just anything competitive and keep evolving?
My goal is to do anything with contact, with full contact, and keep evolving. So, and then when I found Sanshou, and then when I met with Scott Coker, he was promoting. He made a whole new sanctioning body, and then started doing Sanshou super fights for me, and then brought me on to the San Jose show, and I did a few of those shows. Then invited me to go to Vegas and fight in K1 when he became the K1, like the main guy in the USA
Yeah,
promoting
the
K1.
US promoter, yeah.
And then I would always be on the K1 cards in Vegas, and be a super fight, and then they would just get out other Sancho fighters or other freestyle fighters, and then I got to compete on the big stage, on ESPN, or ESPN2 or ESPN, and I believe that's where I made the scissor kick famous.
So Scott was kind of doing both, right? So Scott Coker he had his own little promotion in StrikeForce at the time, which was kind of like kickboxing MMA mix, but it was mostly like kickboxing events. And then he also was doing the K1 as well, right?
Yes.
So he's kind of hit double dipping a little bit, trying to recruit some great talent to his promotion. At what time did StrikeForce kind of switch over to MMA? Because I know it definitely had a lot of more kickboxing early on.
It was
kind of
actually,
like,
I remember in 2005, I already knew Scott was going to throw a big MMA event, and then I just had recovered from hamstring surgery, and they said, hey, we're going to promote MMA. It looks like it's going to track really good. We'd love to have you, fight your first fight with us on that promotion. We'll make you co-main event. I was like, okay, sign me up, or it's like, where do I sign up? And then, jumping on board, already knowing how Scott Coker works. It was real simple. It was a good transition for me. Then, of
easy
course,
for
at
you
the same time,
too, because like your first opponent was somebody you already faced in kickboxing.
yeah, and then actually, I haven't faced. Yeah, sorry, yes, it was Mike Altman. I faced him in kickboxing, and then he mentioned to me that he was doing MMA. He was 1-1 in MMA, and then he said that he always wanted to fight me, and he was just a little bit heavier, and so we met at 179 and we fought. And, it was a good experience, and I guess the rest is history. A lot of people still say too bad you didn't do MMA start younger, but I can't look back now, because if I'm looking back, I can't look forward. It is what it is, and I put my time in, and I worked around the best I could with the family and the schedule and everything that was going on at the time.
I think the biggest downfall, if you ever had to do anything hindsight on your career, was the layoffs that kind of hurt you when you came back, like having like 2 years off and trying to fight again. That's when you kind of ran into trouble in some of your career. And I've heard you talk about it in other interviews. I think you said you'd be undefeated if you didn't take 2 years off between any fights.
That's what I believe. When I was dedicated and focusing just on fights, I was doing well. But then I knew, like before I even started MMA, I had it was my first big surgery. It was on my hamstring and my meniscus, and that took a bit to recover. And I realized, I can't be doing this forever.
Was that damaged in the Ebersol fight?
No, yeah. Right before that, I had surgery, so I fought that fight against one of Frank Shamrock's guys, and then I was in, no, after that, it kind of held me back a little bit because I wasn't fully recovered, so I kind of messed it up a little bit more, like my hamstring, and then I just really took the time and laid off and made sure I fully recovered and kept up my condition, and worked around my injuries. And it's it was rough. It was a tough 6 months of recovery, but and then I got back in. I fought for the last time for Scott in Sanshou, and then from there Javier Mendez and then Scott talked me into doing MMA, and I guess that's when the journey started.
Yeah. Out of your entire Sanshou kickboxing career, who was like the toughest guy you remember fighting?
I should remember the most pressure I had was against at the time this guy from China. They call him the Mongolian King, and he was undefeated for 3 years. He was one of the youngest fighters to rise in China, where most of his wins were by knockout. And then it was the USA versus China in Hawaii, and I was the main event. And
Nashan Giro.
Yeah, yep, right on point. So that was a big one.
I'm prepared, Kung. I got my notes.
Good job. Yeah, I fought him, and it was I felt like I dominated the fight, but I didn't feel like I dominated after, because all the leg kicks I received, and I was pretty banged up after the fight. So it was a good victory for me, and then for the U.S., because it's USA versus China, and the only other two guys that won was guys that were we kind of like brought them in because we couldn't have a full team, so we brought Bunkerd, Fairtex, and Jungsonan Fairtex in as the U.S. team. And both those guys were they weren't Sanshou fighters; they were just amazing Muay Thai fighters, and they went in and then they got some wins for us. So they were the only two that won, and then in the finals, I was the only real Sanshou fighter fighting that have not won yet, and so I went in there against their best, and I got to work. I got the job done.
The famous scissor kick.
Yeah.
So all right, cool. So you transitioned into MMA now. Scott Coker's twisted your arm. Javier Mendez twisted your arm. Got you involved. Speaking of Muay Thai, though, did you ever do Muay Thai, or was that just something you never tried?
No, I just train with the Muay Thai guys, and something that I wanted to try, but the money was more in the MMA, so I just jumped right into the MMA from the Sanshou.
Back then, the money was all in boxing. That's where you should have gone. All right, so you transition to MMA. You have a couple quick fights, couple knockouts. You knocked out Altman again. Brian Warren, Von Flue, obviously famous for the Von Flue chokes and all that stuff. Jason Von Flue moved up, and then you finally fight Frank Shamrock, which is like the first I want to say like your first marquee MMA fight, the one that was kind of the most hyped by Scott Coker and StrikeForce. It was caused by a kick, but kind of an unfortunate ending to that. Frank broke his arm trying to block one of your kicks, which just shows the power that you hit everybody with. What was like the build up to that fight? Because that was like one of your first like main like promoted fights, like hype fights.
I got a little feel of like being promoted against the fight right before that. No, I guess the fourth fight against Tony Strickland. It was Frank Shamrock was the main event, fought Phil Baroni, and then I was the co-main event. And then from there, I guess that from that fight, the talk started happening. What would happen if Kung Lee fought, Frank Shamrock, and I guess Scott Coker made that fight happen. I fought one more against Sam Morgan, and then I was gonna go and have elbow surgery after that, but then Frank jumped in after my fight against Sam Morgan. It wasn't the best performance. I got the KO in the third round. Usually, I was usually I come in really good shape, but for that fight, I was filming, fighting with Channing Tatum at the same, at the same time of training camp, and I thought they only needed me for 1 week, but I ended up being in New York for like almost 3 weeks. So when I came back, I wasn't like in the normal fight shape. So it was like almost building again. Then 3 weeks later, I fought Sam Morgan, and then after that, Frank came in and offered me the fight. So it happened. I just ended up getting elbow surgery anyways, clean it up, and then jump right into training camp without.
Of course, for the middleweight title over StrikeForce at the time as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you had been like kind of dabbling in acting that whole time. I think like you had done like a little bit part in like 97, and then from like 2000 like on, you kind of were doing acting off and on. How much were you really dividing your time back then?
Well, back then I wasn't dividing my time that much. I would like either like have a couple weeks of filming and then I was done. The most was 3.5 weeks. But then, I started getting bigger parts, and then the first big part was Pandorum, and that took me away for almost 3 months, and in Germany, and then after that, I was actually back to back. Like the first project before Pandorum, it was a Master Wu Ping project called True Legends. I was over there for like 3.5 weeks, but then from that, I came back right into filming Pandorum, and then it was just like one after another.
So you're picking up steam. You got everything going on in Hollywood. You got everything going on in MMA. And then you take time off, and eventually you vacate your middleweight title. You never defended the middleweight title, did you?
No, never.
So, and then you can tell the story better than I can. I heard that Scott wanted you to fight Scott Smith, and he took you out to like pho or something like that.
Yep. We were eating pho, and he said he needed a main event for his last show of the year. And I said, I haven't done anything for almost 2 years. I did cardio and maintain my weight so I can look the part. That's it. But my shins are soft right now. It's I came in because I came back home and I hit the gym, and then I was like, oh man, I'm way out of shape. And then I went to eat with Scott, and I said, let me give it a week. I mean, literally after the first 2 days, I called Scott and said, oh, I don't know, I'm way too sore. This is going to take. I probably need more time. He's like, I really need you to fight.
He had already started promoting it, right?
Yep. And so I jumped on board, and I said, all right, let's do it. And the fight didn't turn out the way I wanted. It was going great in the beginning, but then,
I was gonna say, break that fight down for me, because that was kind of epic. The first couple rounds, you were like catching them left and right, and then you get caught.
Well, the good thing was, like, I finally gave my body time to recover from all the years of training.
Yeah.
Then when I came back, like the first round, I remember I hit him with the back kick and he flew across the ring. I was like, wow, this is, I feel great. Then as soon as I hit him with another back kick and he landed on the ground, I started jumping on him. I must have punched him like 50 times, but in one of those punches, I hit my knuckle, and I was like, oh, I hope I didn't break my hand. So I was like, was it driving? And then at one point I was looking at the referee out, like I punched like Scott like 30 times straight at one point, and I thought they're gonna stop it, and then so the referee didn't stop it, so I kept punching, and I remember Scott working his way back up, and I was like, oh man, my shoulders are burning, my cardio was like affected because I was just punching him down there. I was like, shit, and then when we stood up again, I was like, the time ran out, and I went back to the corner. I'm like, I remember Javier's deep breath. And I'm like, holy shit, I'm really tired. He's all, go out there, just stick and move. And I went out there and tried to put on a show again, beat him up for the second round. I came back, and Javier's Cung, you have to listen, stick and move. You already won the fight. You don't really need to do anything. Just go out there and win. And I went out there trying to knock him out, picked him up for a double leg. And I remember he grabbed the like the fence, and I couldn't get him. And then I took him down, and then we stood back up. And from that point on, I was like, oh man, that I should have listened to Hob. I felt like I could have put Scott away, but I didn't. And I was like totally gassed. And when the gas is gone, he caught me like ducking down to take a shot, and he clipped me. And then next thing I know, I was like break dancing across the ring, and then he jumped on me, and and that was it.
Yeah, that was one of, like, when somebody pulls up some of your highlights, like that's one of the ones that always catches people, because you were really dominating that fight, and all you had to do was listen to Javier. Just move, move. Listen to your coaches, people at home. Listen to your coaches. They're the ones watching from the outside. They know you best.
Yeah.
But sometimes I guess you get caught in that moment. I deal with a lot of other fighters. You get caught in that moment. Sometimes you think you know better sometimes, and
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was just one of those situations. Scott Smith's always been super tough. He's had a long MMA career. He's a hard out for anybody. And back then in StrikeForce, he was one of their top guys as well. So, he's a tough guy. But you did get your revenge when you guys did finally meet back up the next year. After that, you transitioned finally over to the UFC. When you jumped over to the UFC, what was the expectation? Were you planning to be one of their top guys, or at that point in your career, because you were getting a little older, was it more for like entertainment type fights, or were you really trying to make a title run?
Well, when I signed on the UFC, I had made an announcement at Comic-Con. I was promoting one of my movies called Dragon Eyes out there. It was this really small um, film with Von Damme, and it got a lot of steam. And so the production brought me out to Comic-Con to promote that movie out there. And I just said, since UFC bought up, all the competition, bought up StrikeForce, I guess if I'm going to fight again, I'll just fight for the UFC. But I'm just gonna. If I don't fight for the UFC, then I'll just focus on, making money in different ways, like doing films or just doing something different. And then right away, Dana White and Lorenzo reached out to me, and then I went in and saw what they offered and decided, I'll give it a run.
Did they have your contract already from StrikeForce, or was it some situation where you had to sign with them?
No.
You had a choice.
I brought my old contract over there with me, and then they already had saw the contract, and then they offered me, more money, and then every fight was, like increased, and then, and of course, the money was great, but definitely if I was going to fight, I wanted to see if I was able to, do something, and not just to go in and fight, but see where I'm at, because at that point I was already like 2 years laid off from fighting. So I guess everyone knows I'm 2-2 in the UFC, and when you don't train full time, and you don't, like, when you're working in both two different careers, again, it's just like that. Like my coach picked me up from wrestling. You want to be good, you want to be great, you got to focus one on the other. But like, it was a tough road for me, like a split road, because I knew I couldn't fight forever. I was already getting into my twilight years, and then with all the injuries I've had, I figure I'm just gonna see where it goes, and then see where I can also make money to provide for my family. And then
even with all his flaws, one of the things Dana's always said is, if your head and your heart are 100% into fighting, don't fight, because you're going to get hurt. And I've heard him say that a number of times. He said it about Chuck Liddell when he thought Chuck was close to being done. Obviously, he always looks out for his boys more than he looks out for the other fighters, but that's another story for another time. You step in there though with one of the all-time greats, Pride champion, up and down UFC career, but Vanderlei Silva, the axe murderer. Like you said, after I think a year and a half, almost 2 years off. What was that experience like? I mean, I know you came out on the bad end of that one with the TKO, but did you think that was a decent matchup for you, or were you
well,
looking forward to that?
well, my first matchup, the UFC had given me an opponent. It was Vitor Belfort, and I don't know what happened with Vitor. He took the fight, but then he ended up dropping out of the fight. He said he had some kind of injury. I don't know what it was. But then they changed Vitor to Vanderlei, and for me, I was like, okay, I guess we just gotta make some adjustments, because Vitor is southpaw and Vanderlei's standard. So just get the right sparring partners, and enter King Mo at his prime at the time. Big guy, good wrestling, and it was.
He's a guy I always wondered how he would have done in the UFC.
Yeah. And then so, take nothing away from Vanderlei. I felt like I was winning both rounds, and then I got caught, and is what it is. It's part of the fight game.
Crazy thing about Vanderlei is you go from Vitor Belfort, who's a more technical striker, a more measured striker. Like he plans his attacks, whereas Vanderlei a lot of times just wild, like comes out crazy sometimes and takes chances, and that's how he gets a lot of his knockouts. So it's a dangerous opponent, but it's a completely different opponent. So, did you have a full camp for Vanderlei, or did you have to switch it up mid camp?
No, I switched. I had a full camp, but I switched up. I had to switch up the game plan for the Vanderlei style.
How many weeks did you have to plan for Vanderlei? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but I went in there. Mentally I was sharp, but condition wise I was a bit off. I had some. It was a rough camp for me.
Now, you had some bright moments in the UFC. It's not like they were all negative. You fought Patrick Cote. You won the decision against him, which ironically was the first decision win of your entire career. You looked great against him. You went over first time in China for the UFC. You knocked out Rich Franklin, who was a former middleweight champion. Talk us through some of that experience, like going over to China, being an Asian fighter, representing Asia, even though obviously Vietnam is different than China, but talk us through some of that experience.
See, that's the big thing that I think, like a lot of people, it's like Vietnam or Chinese or Vietnamese, Chinese,
Completely
Korean.
different.
We're all Asians. If we all supported each other, it would be a lot more, the support, and it would take the sport and the fighters a lot further. It's just like, in anything, it's all everyone stays in their little cliques, right? But for me, I felt like whenever I went out and I fought and represented all the Asian people, all the minorities, and so that's how I looked at it. So not only did I make the Vietnamese proud, but I made all Asian and minorities proud when I won, and that's what I felt like from the fans, always supporting me, from all different nationalities supporting me. So I just represent all the Asians and all the different, just everyone who supported me. So it was
and that was after a tough China, right? That was the finish of tough China, the final or something like that.
The tough China was after the Rich Franklin fight, and
okay.
I was actually supposed to fight Michael Bisping in England, but they said that they wanted me to be the Dana White in China and get that going. So I really didn't have a choice but to do that. When you tell them no, then things are not good. So you just kind of have to be a yes man when you're with the UFC.
Yeah, it's years later, obviously, but I kind of find parallels when Kat Zingano was like offered that role in the Halle Berry movie, and then she said no to the UFC for a fight because she couldn't take the fight while she was getting ready for this movie because they didn't want her to get hurt before the movie, and then she wasn't a UFC fighter anymore, and then she got dropped from the movie. So in hindsight, she probably should have took the UFC fight and just took her chances. But when you're caught between two worlds, especially like that, it's a hard situation. And then, of course, you being the face of all Asian MMA fighters at the time, really, with the UFC and going into China and that huge market, that billion-dollar market that China is, multi-billion-dollar market. But I do remember there was some controversy around that too because they didn't really pay you properly or something like that. I don't know what you can talk about like that, but you said you didn't get paid. You thought you were worth.
I mean, I know because being in the entertainment world, I know what actors get paid. I know what people who do reality TV show gets paid, and man, most of everyone who was a talent on that show, wasn't even making like minimum wage. It was really the pay was really bad, and you really didn't have a say at all. You just it's either that or the highway, their way or the highway.
I mean, they pretty much had a monopoly at the time,
Yep.
especially after StrikeForce was gone.
Yeah.
Bellator wasn't quite what it is now. One didn't exist. PFL, World Series of Fighting, didn't exist. So it was pretty much the UFC if you wanted to be on top.
Yeah.
So we get to your last fight of the career, for your MMA career. Michael Bisping didn't go the way you wanted. It was kind of a little bit of a war in the beginning, but Michael got the best of you later in the fight. Break that fight down for me if you can. Like, what happened? What went wrong in that fight?
Uh, I remember game plan for that with at the time. Then I had Scott Sheely, who was Matt Brown's coach, and then we're still working with Javier Mendez, but like with the other trainers there, and it just everyone just told me to go out there and make it like a point fighting match. So he gets comfortable with standing up and not pushing you on the fence or making it like ugly and kickbox with you, and then you start opening up and doing the Sanshou and the spinning kicks in the second, third, fourth rounds, and then just take one round at a time. And I went out there and played the point game in the first round and got hit in the second round, early in the second round, and his jab broke the bone that holds up the eyeball. So it wasn't the orbital bone, but it was the bone. I don't remember the name of it.
The socket, yeah.
It holds up. It's a really thin bone that holds up the eyeball, and it got cracked, and so I was bleeding inside my face, and I couldn't breathe at one point. I remember it was either the end of the second or the third, and as everyone who fights knows, the cardinal rule is if you got hit in the eye or the nose, do not blow your nose.
Because it goes boom. Yeah.
I had to because it was just I couldn't breathe, so I blew my nose and my face blew up, and I couldn't even see out of one side, and it's not an excuse, but it was his night, and he kicked my ass that night. So it is what it is.
It was a good fight. And at the same time, young Michael Bisping, he's on his way up. He wasn't, even middleweight champion at that point. He was on his way up. And you were obviously had been in the fight game for quite a while. So it was a good fight until the injuries and everything else kind of took its toll on you. But then all the controversy hit, right? Like after that fight, you got the suspension for the elevated HGH, 9 months, then it turned into 12 months. Then later, because of all the controversy, the sample got destroyed.
That's right. The sample got destroyed. How can a sample get destroyed? All you have to do is, okay, what is Michael's numbers compared to my number? That's all you had to do, because luckily, Dr. Caitlin, who was at the time the performance expert for the Olympic Committee, says, "Kung," on Twitter, he says, "Kung level or normal. If you're going to test someone, you have to test them when they wake up at a resting heart rate, and they cannot eat, and they cannot exercise." I just got done fighting, 4 rounds against Michael Bisping, bloody, and again, if I was gonna do something, I wouldn't use HGH. And from there, all my tests were clear. The only thing that was elevated was my HGH level.
And you had never failed a test before either.
I've never ever failed a test. And for HGH, it doesn't help your performance. Why would I take HGH? If I'm going to take something, I'm going to take something that would help my performance, not make me look younger. So yeah. I'm Asian. We age good. I don't need HGH.
HGH helps with recovery, not really with performance. You're right.
But what they don't know, and they, obviously they're not doctors themselves, but if you sit in a sauna for 30 minutes, your HGH level goes up. If you jump out of an ice bath, your HGH level goes up. So I did a lot of research after this. I was like, how is this happening?
It's adrenaline and testosterone, right? Like,
no. I was just, how is this happening that the UFC has me elevated? Where's Michael's numbers? But both our test samples got destroyed. It was crazy. So, long story short, and I went on to just suck it up, and I wasn't planning to retire yet, but then I realized, hey, my son wants to fight. Look at all these other, and my first day hearing about like the UFC, I wasn't with the UFC. I wasn't even doing MMA at the time. I came in, I was going to get some sparring rounds because I trained with all the AKA fighters like Fitch and Mike Swick, Koscheck, and Bobby Southworth, all those guys. And when I came in,
San Jose was
yeah,
a
it was in
hotbed
San
for
Jose.
a
I
long
came in
time.
and everyone was stressed out, and I was like, "What's going on? How come no one's training?" They're like, "Oh, well, John Fitch just got cut and threatened that if he doesn't sign his likeness away for this game, they're going to cut the whole team." I'm like, "Damn, that's crazy." And at the time, I wasn't even part of the UFC, and I was like, "Man, I'm glad I'm not part of them." And next thing I know, years later, I'm part of them, and I'm dealing with the craziness,
The machine.
yeah.
So eventually the suspension does get overturned after only a couple months.
Because of Dr. Caitlin, and they know they were wrong, and yeah.
But the damage was done. Like you were done. You were like, I don't want to fight for you anymore. I want my release. I'm kind of confused on the details of this one because you also have the other lawsuit involved as well. But did you sue to try to get your release from the UFC?
No, I got some help. I got some help from Mark Wayne Mullen. He was very verbal about what the UFC was doing, and then after, I mean, I didn't get released for like a year. If they didn't want me, they can just cut me, but they held on to me because they knew what I can do in Asia and what I did for them in Asia. Come on, I mean, if you look at it, it's not Connor
game.
where Connor was making all this money. Who was the first person who put a bid into buying the UFC? A Chinese investor.
Yeah.
How did the Chinese investor know about UFC when UFC's been out there for several years and haven't even budged, on the Richter scale of a presence out in Asia or in China, because they didn't know what to do. I remember the first time I went to the press conference, Lorenzo and Dana pulled me into the van. They went to Hong Kong when me and Rich Franklin faced off, and I remember Lorenzo asked me, "Do you know the market in China?" I said, "I don't know it that good. I know the film market out here, but as you saw, everyone was asking about my fight scene with Donnie Yen, and they weren't even talking about the fights." And then he's all, "Well, we need you to be the face out here in China, and help out." At the time, as Mark Fisher was the president of the vice president of the UFC China. So, I said, "Okay." After the fight, so I prepared. I got into
because at that point you were a crossover star. Like Tekken had come out, all that stuff had come out. Like China knew you from the movies.
Yeah. So that it was a very big fight against Rich Franklin, and the arena was sold out. I felt like they did very well, and after that fight, that's when they offered me the Michael Bisping fight after that, and then changed their mind. But it wasn't right after. It was probably I can't remember exact time, but a couple months or something like that. But then it led to I had to go out and do the show, the tough show in China, and then after that I had to promote the tough show and do this crazy tour to I put it this way: when they went back to Macau to test out some different stars out there, they brought out Dong Yun Kim, and he was going to fight. I forget the fighter from England, but I literally went out in Singapore and they asked me to do his open workout for him. I did an open workout when I literally got off the plane, drove to the arena, and put on some UFC shorts and did an open workout with my trainer, and then talked about the fight against Dong Yun Kim and his opponent from England,
John Hathaway.
That's you've been monies with everything, but yeah. So I did, and they only sold like literally.
It took me a minute to remember. I was like, China, like England, what?
Yeah. They literally sold only 5,000 seats, and they gave the rest away. So next thing I know, I was doing all this promotion. Then I got the fight with Michael Bisping in Macau and in China. So I did have time to prepare for it. And, I did get in really, really good shape. Finally, got my diet down and went over there injury free. But might as well got injury, because every time I was injured, I fought better. So whatever.
Got healthy, right?
It is what it is.
I mean, a lifetime in body and combat, and you got to get healthy eventually. So during this whole time, MMA career is wrapping up, but on this whole time, you've been in Hollywood. You've been doing roles left and right. You did one of my favorite movies later on, the RZA movie, Man of the Iron Fist. Like, I just love that movie. You were in that as well. But you started off early on, bit role and sleight of hand. You did Walker, Texas Ranger, a little bit of bit TV and movie roles until you finally started getting going. You mentioned fighting already with Channing Tatum. Out of all some of those roles, and then eventually, of course, you did Tekken, which a lot of people know you for as well, especially because of the video game and everything associated with that. What actually got you into Hollywood? Like, how did you get your foot into that role when you were in fighting for so long?
It was the fight after Tony Freakland. It was on Showtime, and I was a co-main event, and I went out there doing wheel kicks, all kinds of like things that people would see in the movies. And I was doing it in the match, and from there, my first Hollywood agent and then Hollywood manager approached me, and then I went out there to meet the guys, and next thing I know, when I went out there, they literally sent me on an audition, and that's when I got fighting with Channing Tatum, and then soon after that I got Tekken because it was like martial law. Of course, I played Tekken a lot back in the day, and I played martial law, so I had to
get you were familiar.
Part. Yeah, and then I did Pandorum, which was my first audition where I didn't have to be physical, and I did that on the all acting, and they basically wanted a Japanese character, but they couldn't find anyone big and physical like me. So I told them I didn't speak Japanese, but I do speak Vietnamese. So they changed the character from Japanese to Vietnamese. So it was.
Was there ever any talk, speaking of like video game characters like that, was there ever any talk of you being in any of the Mortal Kombat movies or anything, especially like the remake they just did and stuff like that?
Back then there was a lot, like a lot of talks, but I was getting paid very well doing the Chinese movies, and then working with a lot of like legendary action directors like Wu Ping, and then legendary directors like Wong Kar-wai. So I was more focused on who I got to work with and who I can learn from, so I can improve my skills.
What's what's probably your favorite role you've done so far?
There's
I mean, I know they're all different, but
I think Pandorum was a very fun and challenging role because I had to maintain a certain weight. It was like cutting weight, but you had to hold it for 2.5 months. And then the other one was the Man with Iron Fist, because it was a good group of with people,
RZA and everybody.
RZA, Batista. A lot.
It was an all-star cast. Yeah,
it was very fun to do. And I guess the other one would be Dragon Eyes, because Dragon Eyes, I had a lot of control. I had a lot of control on the action, and the fight action beat out Steven Soderbergh's Gina Carano and Michael Fassbender at the Action Fest. We came in best action, but they got best action coordinator, which is one of my friends, JJ Perry. He's directing his own movie right now with Jamie Foxx, some vampire movie, but it was just for me a Dragon Eyes, because I had to put all the fights together and be the main actor. That was just a lot of work, but I learned so much from it.
You mentioned before in a different interview about stereotypes, Asian actors and stuff like that, trying to get out of certain roles so you could have more diverse roles in Hollywood. At this point in your career, do you think you still face that when you come for a movie role, being an Asian actor, or do you think it's more diverse now?
I believe it's more diverse now. I think, with everything going on, there's, Sanshou coming out, Mortal Kombat, there's a lot more Asians, that's, getting opportunities, and that's great. I hope they get more opportunities, and we'll see what happens.
I find nowadays that there's such a diverse too, and like not just like a single role. Like I know when you made those comments a few years ago, it was kind of like you were an action star, you had to know kung fu, you had to know this and that. Whereas now you have comedians like Randall Park. You have, and obviously a number of comedians, but you also have like serious roles, drama roles, and a lot more scripts that I think are more suited to Asian actors as well. So I think there definitely is more opportunity. Before we move back to a couple things real quick, you got a couple projects coming out. I heard Valotica is announced for pre-production and Infected is announced. Are you officially signed on for roles in both those so far?
I think we still got a little bit going with that, but we got there's a project that I can't talk about it right now. Soon as we get a green light on that, which I already signed the deal memo, then I'll be able to talk more about that. But it's a project that I wrote, and
talking about Target.
No, it's a different one. I can't mention.
Because I always wonder what happened to Target. I knew you were talking about it a lot a couple years ago.
Yeah, Target got put on the shelf with the big Chinese investor. He wanted to make some changes, so whenever that's what happened. I actually wrote Target too. They came in and they liked the script, but they want to make changes. So when you end up working with certain investors and they want certain things, then it gets done that way. So this one
has COVID messed up a lot of it too, with like the filming schedules and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. COVID was a big part why I didn't do Target, but now I'm focused on this other project that I wrote during COVID, and with everything that's going on, kind of like an end of the world project. I believe it'll be good once we get rolling. Right now we're just starting up all the pre-production stuff. We're about to ramp, so we'll see what happens.
Awesome, man. I hope it comes out. I hope it comes to light. I know with I have another show, Certified Podcast. I talk to a lot of like pop culture type things, and I've talked to some actors on that one. And just in the last year or two, like the way the filming schedules and everything has been messed up, the audition schedules, everything in Hollywood is just so like, if you're a big name, maybe not so much. Like if you're Tom Cruise, you're going to still get the roles and get the sets and everything working and going and doing what you want to do. But if you're not a Tom Cruise, you're not a Brad Pitt, you're not somebody like that, then it's like a struggle even for like well-known actors. So it's definitely something that the whole world's adjusting to right now. One other question before we get to the big one. Your son's now competing. You talked about it a little bit earlier. You're training him up a little bit. I saw some action footage of him. Is it like Muay Thai, or is he doing Sanshou? Like, what exactly is he doing?
Well, there's this fight league, right? It's called PMT.
Yeah.
They call it Point Muay Thai, but they let the action go. And just because with all the rules and regulations,
I definitely saw some takedown stuff. I was
yeah.
like, wait, what?
So they let stuff go. They should do that because it's with the athletic commission coming in and these promoters, they're trying to make ends meet, right? They throw an event, and there's a lot of costs when you have to sanction an event, from the police that has to be there, from the ambulance or EMT that has to be there, then the insurance that has to be there, then security, and then, I mean, there's so much things.
There's a lot of layers to throw.
There's a lot of layers.
It's not as simple as like, hey, let me get 10 fighters, let me go. There's a lot. I've learned that the hard way through some other stuff throughout the years. Yeah.
So it's a great league for someone like my son, because when I came up, I did tournaments. I've done. I can't remember the amount of tournaments I went to, and I paid for myself. Yeah. So my son, I wanted my son to get into the tournament, and I was like, hey, maybe, at your age group, maybe you won't take as much head damage.
How old is he now?
He's 16. He's 16. But as you see, they're letting things go. My son's fighting full on, and he's doing really well. So I feel that, and
I saw something on Instagram where he took the last fight even with like his stomach was hurting and other things. And
yeah, we went down to Orange County, Huntington Beach, to meet with one of my investors, and the investor says to stay at his beach house, and kick back and let him train at all the local gyms. There was, the King's Gym and then Tiki's Gym. So I got a chance to bring him over there, train with all the guys out over there. And one of my buddies who's is cornering in the main event this weekend, Miles. He's a Dutch kickboxer, really, really awesome fighter. He held pads twice for Anthony. Anthony got to work in at King's Gym with a bunch of the pros and amateurs out there. So it was a great time for Anthony. He got a lot of experience, but then coming back, he said he had body aches and his stomach wasn't feeling good. And then so we were supposed to weigh him in on Friday, and then he wasn't feeling good. So I just took him straight home and then let him rest and drove him up the next day. It was like Tracy's like an hour away, and we didn't want to hang out there. So we drove back so he can just rest. So he rested, and when we knew exactly when he was going to fight, because they're pretty organized for the most part. And then when I drove him back, he still wasn't feeling good, but he says he doesn't know when the next lockdown is going to be. So just give him a chance to fight, because what if another lockdown comes down? He already missed his whole wrestling season, and he's pretty good in wrestling too. So he already missed his whole wrestling season. And so he didn't want to miss this fight. So he took the fight feeling, he had aches, and then his stomach was upset, and he went out there and still won. So I'm very proud of him. So from that, I made him his own shirt. Got his Anthony shirt right there.
Nice.
And Team Kung Lee in the back, and now he can start, selling to all his friends so he can raise money.
Might have to pull some negotiations, get that up in the Fighters First shop.
Yeah, definitely. And then
I'm serious too.
Yeah, it's a great team. Bay Area Tactical. They got this artist out there, Matt. He does all their artwork, and he made Anthony a logo. And
I see it. So
pretty cool.
Anthony Lee on the bottom.
Yeah. And Team Kung Lee in the back. So I'm very proud of my son. He's been working really hard.
Are you training anybody else, or just your son right now?
I train a few other fighters, but just my son is like the main focus. The other fighters train with me once or twice a week.
What's his goal? Does he eventually want to be a professional fighter, or is he just doing it to compete?
He wants to be the best of the best. So
how do you feel about that as a dad? I know I was talking to Ray Cepho before, and his son is like doing a lot of the training and coaching and helping him with Extreme Couture, but he doesn't want to be a fighter. He's just doing it for self-defense and learning how to protect himself, and obviously his daughter too. But he has other interests outside of fighting. How do you feel about your son getting involved into the fight game?
It's nerve-wracking. I know the sacrifices we all as fighters have to make. And, again, I got a lot of experience, and, I tell my son the same thing my wrestling coach told me before: good or great, what do you want to be? So, and he wants to be great. So I've done a lot. Because of him, because of all the other fighters, the 1,215 fighters I represent, not only me, but like everyone who's part of this lawsuit. And I got to give credit to, Rob Maysey, who started this whole thing with Carlos Newton, those guys. And Rampage is the one who brought me into this. And
you're transitioning for me. This is called a segue. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Cool. I did that for you. Rampage segued. He's the one who got me into this lawsuit. And then I met with Rob, and from there, the rest is history. No one believed that we could make it. 7 years later, I'm still representing 1,215 fighters, but I don't see
You're
it.
You're talking about MMAFA?
Yeah. Well, not for this lawsuit. This lawsuit represents 1,215 fighters, but they recently sent in an extension for the fighters now, and all the fighters up into this date to get back pay.
So no longer is cut off at 2017. Now it's like all the way through.
Well, they just sent the request in, so I'm sure they're going to get it. But right away, as you know, the judge said that he would certify the class. So right away, all these, not all, a lot of other law firms. There's this one other law firm. I call them Cappuccino because I don't want to use their real name. It's similar to Cappuccino. They're in it for their quick fix. They've sent out
People at
FedEx.
home can probably figure it out with a couple of Google searches.
They sent out some packages, FedEx, which they're spending their own money. They're sending it to fighters, letting them know that if they don't sign up with them, they're not going to get part of this lawsuit. That's incorrect. All the fighters have to do is sit back and let us do our work, and be supportive, retweet, what MMAFA posts, and support us, because in the end, it's going to come down to where you're at in the fight, whether you're the main event all the way down to the undercard. An expert will come in and break down, here's the lawsuit that we won, will win, and this is the amount of money that's in there, and each person will get the pay accordingly to where they are in where they were in each fight.
And for those at home that don't know exactly what Cung is talking about, December 14th, you guys filed a lawsuit, essentially saying that the UFC was actively working to eliminate competition. They bought up StrikeForce, they bought up Pride, and they were controlling the vast majority of the market. The plaintiffs estimated that 19.5% of the revenues go to the athletes, compared to closer to like a 50-50 split in other sports. The NBA famously gives the players at least 51%. And then, of course, in 2020, December 2020, late last year, the judge agreed to change it to a class action lawsuit, which then opens it up, definitely increases your opportunity to win the lawsuit. Of course, a lot of this is based on the Ali Act, which doesn't allow fighters to be exploited, the rankings to be rigged, the matches to be rigged, and so on and so forth. And then also throughout the time, you've also started up, along with some partners, the MMAFA, trying to help unionize the fighters as well. Did all that sound accurate? I kind of was trying to sum it up for the people.
Everything was accurate except the union, being a union, right? We're more like an association.
Okay.
We
more like representation to help the fighters out.
Well, Rob, like a lot of people don't know this, but Rob Maysey, he's been at this 10 years before we even started the lawsuit, right? So he knows the ins and outs, and if it wasn't for him and Caller Snooten talking, this would have never happened. So, I got to credit both those guys, and we have an amazing team of different lawyers from around the country teaming up with us, and Eric, the lead counsel, Eric Kramer, and just all the other lawyers. They've been fantastic, and as you know, we got a chance to listen in on some of the debates between UFC's lawyer and Eric Kramer, our lawyer. And I got to say, it was definitely a one-sided match. How I saw it.
Well, I mean, you got a lot of ex-fighters and some current fighters along with you on this lawsuit. John Fitch, you mentioned earlier, Nate Quarry, Brandon Vera, who's kind of active still. He just lost recently, but he's been fighting throughout the years. Javier Vasquez, Kyle Kingsbury, some notable UFC guys. Obviously, John Fitch went over and did some other things as well, World Series of Fighting and stuff like that. So you have a lot of firepower in this lawsuit because of your experiences, and you guys know firsthand. I know it's a sore subject for a lot of people, but Ken Shamrock's been screaming for years about how fighter pay, and he's gotten blackballed from the UFC. Like, he's not invited to events, he's not invited to anything because he screams so loud about fighter pay. What kind of backlash have you guys received from like the UFC over this whole thing?
Yeah. Of course, you don't see us at the events or anything.
Yeah.
I'm sure we would never be invited there. So,
you think they could hold it against you, like in the future? Like, say, for instance, your son's career takes off, he wants to go fight in the UFC. You think Dana would hold that grudge?
I don't know. Only time will tell, right?
I mean, thankfully now there's a lot more opportunity with PFL and one championship and Bellator, obviously with Scott Coker and stuff. But
yeah. I definitely, I hope this changes the dynamics of how they think and how they approach, because if you look at it, if it wasn't for the fighters, there is no promotion. It's not. Look, Dana White and the Fertitta brothers, they've done a big part to help expose the MMA, but they're not the only rich guys out there that wanted to promote MMA. I remember at one point Mark Cuban came in and dabbed his hand, and tried it out. There's a lot of other promotions that tried, but here and there, you see how the UFC they don't want no other competition to make it, so they would throw events on the same day. I remember the Affliction event, what they had Anderson Silva fight at 205 on the same day.
I mean, it's business. Competition is what it is, but there's still also, and I'm not worried about Dana White ever wanting to come on this show. I've said enough bad things about him on Art of MMA that he's probably not going to come on. But like, they're still doing it. When Ariel Helwani famously got left ESPN, not too long ago, he started doing the rounds again because now he could freely talk. One of the things that came out is that this new crypto deal where everybody's wearing crypto on their shirts, the fighters don't get a penny of that. Not a single penny out of the crypto deal. They get money from Venom for the kits. But the crypto, not a single penny of that deal is going to the fighters.
And without the fighters, there's no deals. Again, it's the world we live in, but we could make changes in these areas, and that's what me and the other fighters are trying to do for all the current and some of the past and the future fighters to come. So that's our goal. That's our goal, to make it a better place, make it almost like boxing. So you're not stuck in a long-term contract, and your likeness is not being abused and used. And then hopefully some of these fighters will get some real insurance. And over here, if you're locked into a contract, you should be getting the full benefits, but you're not.
Last question before I let you get out of here. Seems to be a hot topic nowadays. With events like Triller, obviously Vitor Belfort fighting Oscar De La Hoya. You have Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, and some of these exhibition fights they've been putting on. You still have that competitive itch where if they called you, you might want to do like an exhibition fight to make some money?
I think it's always in the blood. You're once a fighter, always a fighter. But unless it's really good money, and people like to see me for my kicks and throws. My hands are pretty good, but it just depends. Let's see.
If you had one fighter you could line up in an exhibition right now, and not Jake and Logan Paul, like one real fighter, like who would you call out?
I really
like, who's that one guy you never got the chance?
Shit. I mean, a great matchup would be me and Anderson Silva. There was a little bit of talk about that before he had to fight Chris Weidman.
He's getting ready to fight Tito Ortiz now in a boxing fight.
Yeah. So, I mean, that fight never happened, but it was brought up by Joe Rogan brought it up one time, and then after Rich Franklin, Anderson had brought it up, but it just never happened. So
that would make big money. Anderson Silva versus Kung Lee in like Hong Kong or somewhere in China or Japan or somewhere like that.
Yeah,
that would be a big money fight. So put that in the universe for promoters. Give Kung a call. He might actually say yes. Man, I appreciate all your time. I appreciate your honesty with everything, especially talking about the lawsuit and stuff like that. I know there's only so much you can say, but I just want to say I appreciate your time today, man.
I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, the legendary Kung Lee. We'll definitely try to have him back on someday, talk about some of this, especially after the lawsuit wraps up and they win. Fingers crossed. Looking out for all the fighters.
God will make it happen.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate your time, Kung. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great one.